Hi, this is Kripolish. We're here with the Madison ModPo group, and we're going to discuss 3 poems today. We'll do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll get to our Frank O'Hara poem. So starting on my right.
Martha Kaplan. As most of the people here, I'm from Madison, but originally I'm from Seattle by way of Houston, Texas for a while, and Chicago. So I'm a poet.
I'm Roger McClanahan. This is my 3rd year with ModPo, and I've been dabbling more in ModPo Plus, and I also tried to take a couple of short courses, the Ann Waldman course, and also Mandana had a course on John Ashbery. At one point in my life, I was very active in the poetry scene in New York City, and I would go to the events at St. Mark's on the Bowery. And so I actually met Ashbery when he was at the height of his power, which meant that he was also very good looking and very much sought after. He was kind of the linchpin in that whole poetry world there. But anyway, I have a lot of connections with that, and John O'Hara was somebody that, Frank O'Hara was somebody that my friends at the Museum of Modern Art knew and disliked intensely. So I know something about what he was like to be a person. If anybody wants to look over there, there's a lithograph by Alfred Leslie, and the writing on it makes a reference to his relationship with John O'Hara. And Al Leslie is a very close friend of ours, and he gave us this as a wedding gift when we first got married. So that's where I'm coming from, and I'm stalwart. I keep plodding away and trying to get through a full course without falling off at tender buttons, or somewhere along the line there's so many distractions in your life that you finally say, well, I'll wait for another year. So this is another year, it'll be another spring, it'll be another ModPo event, and I'm so thrilled to have found all of you here and to realize that Madison is really a destination for people in the poetic world, and not just some kind of, most of my friends thought it was just a super joke when I left New York to come to Madison.
Yeah,
They
welcome
were
to the
wrong.
welcome to the flyovers.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You're stepping up culturally.
Yeah, if you weren't in California,
Much
you
more
weren't in New York.
cosmopolitan.
You know.
Yeah.
And it used to be San Francisco, but please, now LA. You know.
So,
Well, I'm Lou Ling, and I feel kind of out of place here. I'm a West Coaster. I went to school in San Francisco, and I'm a physician. And now I'm retired, and I have grandchildren here, so I moved from the Central Valley of California, believe it or not, to here. And it's wonderful and lovely. I'm a ModPoer for 2 years. I always get to Gertrude Stein, and then it falls apart. But I'm here to learn, and I am looking forward to it.
You're not out of place. I'm West Coast.
I'm Jim Roseberry, and I'm from Chico, California. And I went to Berkeley in the 60s and came to Madison to go to grad school and stayed ever since. And so my 2 homes are Northern California and Dane County. But I'm slowly getting a home in around Austin, Texas, because I have 2 kids who live there. I am an economic historian by training, and I've studied history and philosophy and math, a lot of math. So I come at literature and poetry as a dilettante, as someone who just loves to read and think about it, but never intends to become a scholar in the area. So I hope to learn a lot from you, and it's very pleasant to be here. Thank you.
Scott?
I'm Scott Holder, Roger's husband, and I grew up in New Jersey, but then lived in New York and San Francisco for a while, and that's me.
All right.
Moving on.
All right. Well, Jim, do you want to lead us on?
Where in the Central Valley?
In Colfax.
Colfax?
No, not Colfax.
Yeah, you're further south.
All right.
Visalia, really.
Yeah, Visalia, I know that area.
Well,
Okay, you want,
Jim,
Kurt asked me to
So do
start.
I.
Okay.
And so, as a dilettante and a person who never intends to be a scholar in this area, I relish talking about this poem and the painting. And what I mostly expect to do is learn a lot from you all and turn it over to you as quickly as possible.
And we're discussing the.
Larry Rivers' painting, Washington Crossing the Delaware, a poem by Frank O'Hara, which is a reflection on the painting. Now, how much does everybody know about Larry Rivers?
Little.
What I
Plenty,
read.
more than I care to.
Okay. I got a couple of his books out of the University of Texas Library and looked at them, and one was very pornographic and lots of erectile functioning and portraits. So he was a, what do you say? He was an avant-garde painter in the 50s, New York scene, abstract painter. From what I've learned is that he was a bit of a rebel in the sense that he wanted to push the envelope on painting, but he didn't want to go too far. And I've got a question for all of you. Politically, is he a log cabin Republican?
No, not at all.
Okay, well, I wondered about that because I got the sense that he was pushing the envelope. He was clearly into gay culture and whatever, clearly part of all that. But there was a kind of a conservative theme there that said, I don't want to go too far. I don't know. I'm probably misread him totally. But in any event, he's the artist who painted. And the painting is a takeoff on a painting from the 19th century of Washington crossing the Delaware. And it'll be fun thinking about the original painting, his painting, and then Frank O'Hara's take on it. Frank O'Hara was into the gay culture in the 50s in New York also, and the poem is on seeing Larry Rivers' Washington crossing the Delaware at the Museum of Modern Art. I guess that's where it is. Has anybody seen the painting live?
Not
I've
live.
seen it.
Yeah, okay.
Also, I might add that he is bipolar,
Okay,
seriously, and he's nobody to fool around with.
Okay.
I would say that.
okay.
But also, Larry Rivers was a very prosperous poet and painter, and he
Right.
was really the anchor of the New York poetic scene for a while. And I've seen a lot of his work. His work is still carried by a very major gallery on 57th Street, and he still shows his work frequently. But he's a very madcap guy.
Well, I got that sense just from
Yeah.
a little bit of what I saw.
That's right.
Yeah, I was
And
wondering,
apparently-
I knew he was prosperous, so I was wondering if the conservatism
Oh,
actually had to come to,
thank you,
had something
thank
to do
you.
with market.
Bring it out, log cabin Republican.
You know,
All
well,
right.
that's-
I'm just
It's
joking.
not, it's not, I
I'm
know what you mean.
joking
I
in
know,
saying that.
it's okay.
But there's an element
Jim,
of
it's
truth
okay.
in it.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. But it may not be, I mean, if your living is tied up,
He's an entrepreneur.
yeah, there are other painters like, and I'm blocking on a name, but what's her name, who was married to, what's his name?
Kenyon. Jane
Pollock,
Kenyon?
Pollock's wife.
Oh, I don't know.
She didn't sell as well because she wasn't, among other things, she shifted styles a lot. And when you shift styles, people don't purchase as easily because they want to, quote, know what they've got and what
Well,
their
she
investment
never
is.
was on the cover of Life
Yeah.
magazine.
All
and
those things, of course.
the
But
stuff
she was
that-
very good.
Yeah,
so,
she
I
is
mean, her
very
Gaia
good.
is in
And she's
the
come into
mocha.
her own now
Yeah,
as
exactly.
a woman women artists had such a difficult time
Yes,
getting
yeah.
anywhere because it's
Yeah,
such
this
a
is not news.
male-dominated
Yes.
field. And there's a foundation that's devoted. Well, I'm very big at where people are buried, and she and Jackson Pollock are both buried in a cemetery in the Springs, which is out in Long Island. And my friend Hannah Wilkie, who I have 3 works by her here,
Mhm.
she is buried in the same cemetery. A lot of other celebrities from the art world found their way there. But anyway, so Hannah Wilkie responded that she finally had a place on Long Island.
Yeah.
She always wanted to
So
have
I mean,
one.
so the point of this was the saleability of art in which is bringing in the larger culture, how it impacts on the arts. So if Larry Rivers had that, if you sense that conservative strain, you know, there's also can I sell my work kind
Well,
of.
he
I
sold-
consider that,
And he
that
did.
taps
It was-
into where I was
yeah.
headed, yes.
Yeah, okay,
You
all right.
greatly, and I just
Yeah.
came to it on my own.
Okay, so
Uh,
that's cool. That's perceptive.
But in any event, he painted Washington crossing the Delaware right after he finished War and Peace, and so he was
I haven't
He was
seen
involved
that.
with that, huh?
yeah he was moved by that, and
Mm.
and simply stated, I'm not. Let's go to the poem.
Yes.
All right. The first sentence, I think, really. Anybody want to comment on? I think that it gets at the essence of the painting and what he and O'Hara's perception of it.
I was intrigued by the notion that our hero has come back to us.
Yes.
Well, you know, where has he been? And it was more of a strategic retreat, as I recall. When Washington crossed the Delaware, he was trying to get away from the British at the time. And the escape was save the army.
That may be
But so-
historically accurate
Right, so-
portrayal of it.
So
But
that,
What
what is
about
it?
the painting? The 19th century painting shows
Yes.
Washington, the hero,
That's
saving us all. The big body, the
Right.
full garb, the hat, the people in the boat he's taking across the
Has
river.
anybody been watching the Olympics?
Yes.
Has anybody seen that ad
Yes.
of Washington crossing the Delaware
Delaware
Freeway,
Highway.
the Delaware Highway?
Well,
Yes.
you know what
Very
right
perceptive.
I
very
brought, that
perceptive.
just came to my mind
Yeah,
when
yeah.
I saw this.
this
poem.
morning in the New York Times, they have found
I was going to say something
Yeah.
about seeing.
some of the hair of George Washington. And they found it in Union College. I don't even know where Union College is, but some librarian found it, and it's been resuscitated, and it is believed to provide enough DNA testing for people to start playing around with who the real George Washington might have been. Anyway, it's fascinating. little
One of
aside.
Thomas Jefferson's offspring.
Yeah, well,
On the wrong side of the bed.
Anyway, when it mentioned his nose and all, if you see the guy who's playing Washington on this ad, he has a nose like this too. So
But don't you think,
Trembling
now
on
that our
fingers.
hero has come back to us, what the painting and what the poem does is deconstruct the mythology of
Right.
Washington's place in American
Right.
history.
well, you almost couldn't overestimate it. I was on the board of trustees of a small historic house in Manhattan called the Morris Jumel Mansion, and that's where George Washington took up the top floor and was able to look on both sides of the Hudson and plot his campaign. The Battle of Washington Heights, which was very key to getting us where we are today as Americans, kind of.
But I want to get back to this. Has come back to us.
Yes,
Yes.
talk
Because-
about that.
The us here sounds like the present,
Mhm.
as
That's right.
as if we're bringing
1953.
yeah,
to
as
be
if we're
accurate.
bringing Washington back to us, making him human, looking at him
That's right.
not as the myth, as you point out. So that's one piece of it. It's also historically a reference to just getting away from what I think is from getting away from the British. But it's an interesting way of saying retreat. But I think it's more that first sense that I was talking about. He's come back to us, stripped of the mythology.
That's right.
And we're in white pants.
Although he was wearing white pants in both paintings.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause part of this goes to the painting too. So
Yeah. What about his nose trembling like a flag under fire?
Well, first of all, I like the alliteration that keeps happening in this poem. So, in this first verse, you have flag, fire, forces, and then the next verse at the last line, flaming, feeding. And it's just the repetitive sound just helps stitch the poem together. So it's almost an aside, but I like the technique.
It's not an aside. That's important.
Well, that's what makes the poem effective as a way of expressing that sentiment, as opposed to a prose essay.
And we see the calm, cold river.
Yeah, it's
The
supporting our
alliteration.
forces.
Yeah.
What about that?
And all the
It's supporting
soldiers
our
didn't have
forces.
boots, they had their feet were wrapped in rags. I mean,
Yeah.
the mythology of this particular episode is
And there's this calm when we're talking about battles. It's an interesting thing to put the word calm into.
well, in the history
A
too,
war.
there was a question of whether they could do it that night.
No,
when they
there's
were
all
doing
that,
it.
but just
Because of the weather and all, and it
That's right.
happened, and
Yeah.
Washington was going to call it off, and then the weather was good, the river was calm, and they did it. They went across.
Doesn't the painting, the original of Crossing the Delaware, does it show waves on the river?
No, what it shows.
Yeah, I can't remember.
What it shows is fundamentally is the boat. Everyone is in the boat. In Larry Rivers' printing, people are out wandering in the river. That's part of what's going on in this sentence. And the river is supporting them. Really? Okay. I
Well,
got
it does
Let
physically,
me
right?
just finish. Let me just finish. And then what's in? Really, you don't see the river. What you see are little icebergs. And here's an aside. Actually, according to one critic, the Delaware River doesn't have icebergs in it. If you were going across it, it would have sheets of ice. And so the painter of the 19th century who painted it was using the images of what he would likely see on the Rhone River or on the Rhine River. And it's very interesting. He's German, and so it's not terribly historically accurate as what you're crossing. That's just an aside, but
no, but it was very 19th century and
yes,
yeah, losing my words. But when I think of the French paintings and the paintings of the Revolution,
Yes.
there's the female icon of liberty, and they also have this sort of monumental something that
presence.
never would be in truth.
No, no. So it wasn't even an accurate depiction
Yeah.
of crossing the Delaware, the original painting. Now, what's going on with the river in Larry Rivers' painting?
Well, there's almost a pun going on here with the cold river supports the troops, as in, provides whatever the word is. It floats the boats across. It supports it literally, physically, but it's also, I think, a pun on let's support our troops. The calm, cold river is supporting our forces. So I read it in both senses.
I think that's a really good observation, having gone through Vietnam and knowing what the many interpretations of supporting the troops has come over time. I like that analysis.
And
But-
our forces, not troops, but
Yeah,
forces,
yeah.
which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, force would be another word for troops,
But
but
it has
has
other
many
meanings,
connotations.
yeah.
Exactly. But what's happening in the river in the Larry Rivers painting? What are these people doing? They're riding horses in the middle of the river. So what do you make of that?
You've also got, if you look on those of us who have, on the right, there is a soldier that looks like he's in World War One.
Good point.
Kind of thing. So he's like, we've got a bunch of historical references.
Yeah.
And we have a pioneer, looks like
This one right
woman
here, this
maybe. So the emblem of the West. you
That's
know,
right.
Yeah, and
We're all wrapped
if
up
you just
like-
I
look
think it's very
around,
like the
it's,
Revolutionary guys were.
you know, and the boat, the tail end of the boat looks like, you know, some sort of skiff off of a sailboat or something.
And the boat is only supporting Washington in this painting.
And his leg, the white
original.
merges into the boat. I mean, so we
Yeah.
have a lot of, let's say, soft edges to objects.
Yeah.
So you have the kind of land, and I'm looking to see, do we have any Native Americans here?
There are women.
There are women,
There's a woman in the original painting too.
and
My thought
like I'm not sure what this figure
Scott,
is.
is should one take literally the calm, cold river, or does that refer to the river of history?
Ah.
Which is hardly calm.
It
But-
is
too, yeah.
which is hardly calm. So I think there's a kind
Well,
of irony.
yes,
There's an
it-
irony working here, I
Yeah,
think too.
but
But I think
is
you're
it though?
right.
I mean, it's
I think it's
dispassionate.
allegorical. Yeah.
History is dispassionate. It just each day moves on, whether we have chaos or calm. It is a constant stream of time.
I think it's true, but I think it's also modified by the beautiful history. I think there's really
Oh, yeah,
irony
but is that
in
a
this.
sarcasm?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I think it's
Oh,
ironic.
Surely, and
you know.
remember, this is the painting and the poem are in the midst of the McCarthy era.
Yes.
That's important.
That is really important. Yes,
Very
it is.
important.
The beautiful history.
Yeah,
Our hero.
that's right.
Trembling. And trembling it has meanings that may not be courage. Of course, they, you know, if we get literal, it is courage, but
Yeah,
in this sense, it may be indicating something other.
yeah.
How does a nose tremble? I just can't physically do that, and I don't know how that would ever occur.
It flares, but
Flares, yeah.
Yeah, but tremble was
Yeah.
the word that was chosen.
and like a flag under fire.
But you
Well,
know,
isn't that
if my nose
the
is trembling,
national
maybe that's a
anthem
way of
that
saying
they-
I'm really scared. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you
Um,
lead with your nose, or your nose is your
Well,
flag.
what's the
your
what are the
you
last
know?
two words in the poem? Let's jump to that quickly.
general fear.
There you go.
Well, the little phrase that really struck me is to be more revolutionary than none is our desire.
What does that mean?
To be, well, I don't think of nuns as being all that revolutionary, frankly.
Although actually, if you think of them in Salvador,
Yeah,
but
Good point.
yeah,
but also you also
they're more
think
revolutionary than the
of,
priests.
at least at the time this was happening, there was a group of nuns which opposed the Vietnam War.
Yes.
They were right there with Cesar Chavez all the
right.
way. So they were pretty revolutionary right then.
But this is 50s.
Yeah, but why is a
50s,
nun
yeah.
revolutionary?
Yeah.
Is a nun revolutionary? The word nun is very loaded.
Well, I
Very
think
loaded.
a nun is a person who turns her life away from
Right.
secular life and becomes inward, and I think she is revolutionary in the idea of,
Because both things, she gives up her personality in a sense, gets married to God, and becomes a sort of a non-person, which is the opposite
I
of being a
think, yeah.
revolutionary.
Well, he says what he means by being more revolutionary. It's to be secular and intimate, as when citing a red coat.
You smile and
You
pull the
smile.
trigger.
But a nun is just the opposite.
I think this
of
is
being
all
secular.
clues to some
Absolutely
really
the
biting
opposite of being
irony.
secular.
What?
I think these are all clues to very biting
Oh
irony.
yes, this is
You know, when citing it, you smile and pull the trigger.
right.
Well, in a long, loose thought, nuns are not intimate, in at least a sexual sense. So you know, not secular, not intimate, but the poem suggests to be more revolutionary than a nun. Which the nuns I have met can be very politically active and can be zealous. So I read to be more revolutionary than
Although,
someone who's zealous, but contrary to that, perhaps it's the secular and intimate.
also, did Larry Rivers in his bio, did he come through Catholic schools? Because those nuns may not be so
well,
revolutionary.
I think,
You know.
if I'm not mistaken, I think Larry Rivers is Jewish, isn't he?
I should know, but I don't. So,
Well, anyway, that's.
so
it's
even
not-
there, that's another
yeah.
bit of irony.
But at any rate, you know, this very period of time that John O'Hara, Frank O'Hara was involved with was a time of extreme secular anxiety, you'd call it, because this was, as you say, this was the Army McCarthy period, and to me, also Larry Rivers' paintings often left a lot of white space around them. So you had to use your imagination to fill in that space. That was his very crafty about the way he did that. And you know, like, do you remember his, Larry painted a sort of takeoff on Rembrandt with the cigars prominently featured that one of his works is like that. I think it's just very interesting if we could connect the visual and the poetic, because this is a good chance at making heads and tails of those two forms of expression.
Maybe we should finish
I
reading
think that the
through.
second
and
stanza
then-
too has to do with a reflection on war, and that was the time around the time of the Korean War.
Korean War.
And
Or
I
just
barely
after.
missed that because I of my age, but I had friends who were in that. And this idea of killing somebody with a smile and pulling the trigger really struck me. And I was going to bring a poem, but my printer doesn't work. There's a poem called "How to Kill" by Keith Douglas, and it's all about a soldier who is got the enemy in his sight, in his telescopic sight, and he's thinking about the fact that that guy has a mother, and that mother loves him, and he has a girlfriend, and then he pulls the trigger, and then he said, "How easy it is to make dust. How easy it is to make dust." And that just came to me as I saw this, where as sighting a red coat, you smile and you pull the trigger.
Well,
that's a reflection on how silly war is, how absolutely horrible war is.
Having gone through basic training at Fort Lewis, Washington, and eventually ending up in Vietnam, I think your analysis is very good, because what they attempt to do is make you
Theology.
capable of killing someone. And they know going in, 99.9% are not. They're averse to that, or a large percentage. And
We have to get to the poem, you guys. We really are going off, and I'm
Well, I think that's what
equally
this,
responsible.
Well,
that's what
no.
this
Let me just
is
finish
like.
this point.
Well, what's up
And
with
I
that?
think it's a germane point.
Yeah, okay.
And that is that during basic training, they cite God and your national heroes as the justification for doing
Of
these
course.
things.
No, of course.
And this is a deconstruction of that.
No, I think
Yeah,
you're right. I just think
yeah.
we can tie it right down
Yeah.
to the words
Yeah,
in the
Well,
poem.
then the next
So,
stanza says,
yeah.
all these considerations, the abstractness of it, if you just let them evaporate, if you let them go away, then we are free. But we're not free of all of these things. They just turn to smoke and they disappear. But
And I'm not sure how to read that. I know the second stanza goes right into the third.
Yes.
So anxieties,
It does.
animosities,
Yeah.
flaming,
Yeah.
feeding, great, stitched together on theoretical considerations.
God and George Washington are on your side.
Well,
And
theoretical.
jealous
There you go.
There's
spirituality.
your ideology.
There you
know?
nailed it.
Yeah.
And jealous spiritualities,
Of the
like the nun.
abstract.
But
That's
just
right.
the spirituality maybe ties back to none.
But I think it's of the abstract is a really important modifier to
Absolutely.
that. You know, so it's your ideas.
Ideology is even
So anxieties
closer.
and animosities are fled. I mean, are fed and inflamed
Mhm.
by ideologies, and these are like jealous spiritualities. So like mine, not yours. My idea is not yours. And then there's the robot, you know, and then just they're smoke and they evaporate above the physical event. They burned up. See how free we are?
There we go.
So
Yeah.
no, the jealous spiritualities of the abstract, which reminds me that when Rivers did this painting, people were upset because it was not done in the abstract expressionist mode. So that might be one way of looking at that
You
particular.
know, the essence of that.
Cool, that's an interesting.
That point was made up by many critics, and he did it intentionally, because the abstract, those who were wedded to that motif, didn't want something as representational as his painting. Of course, his representation is different than the 19th century painting, but that's a very interesting point about Rivers.
And I didn't get though the robot, the jealous spiritualities of the abstract, comma, the robot.
The person who believes in the ideology and does it mindlessly.
That
Pulls the trigger because they went through basic training. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you let these things burn up and you don't think about them, then you're really free.
That's right.
And we're
But
a
if you
nation
start
of
thinking
persons.
about the implications of these things, you may not be so free. That's my interpretation.
Well, and I think that does work, in that if the spiritualities, the abstract considerations, O'Hara says they're billows above the physical event, they
Right.
burned up, and now free.
Right.
But does he mean free in an ironic sense?
Absolutely free.
See how free we are. That's
It's mocking, exactly.
Or maybe see how free we are when they've burned up. It could be read either way, I think.
well. That's the only way.
Which I think is
could be
clever.
Free from that is think about it.
Well, the smoke, I mean, the spiritualities have burned up.
But then we get to see how free we are, exclamation point, as a nation of persons.
Right, rather than groups, persons,
Or,
or individuals,
Rather than a nation of robots.
or robots.
Yeah.
Yes, persons.
Right.
If he's Jewish, that could.
He is Jewish.
And if he's Jewish, and so to become a mensch, to
Roger is
become a human.
correct. He
Yeah.
grew up in the Bronx and he's
Yeah.
Jewish.
So a nation of persons. Persons also is a deeply. It's a conceptual, to become a mensch is a goal, to become a human being, as
Sure.
opposed to
Good observation.
a full human being rather than
You bet.
which is not an easy thing to become.
Now,
So
the fourth stanza really lays it out there, the first part.
It's first of all, it's addressed to Washington, right?
yeah,
Dear father of our country.
so alive you must have lied. Wow,
All politicians lie.
you must have lied incessantly
You can't be a successful politician and not
No.
lie.
Have any of you read
to be immediate.
Hamilton? I recommend it. It's a great. Hamilton was a close ally of Washington, and they stayed that way through all thick and thin. And this, that book is great reinforcement for what's going on here.
Can you
Yeah.
give an example?
Well, that Washington was a human being, and he was a politician, and he lied.
He lied, sure.
They all did.
And speaking of that, we had a president at this time whom historically nobody that's ever held the office has ever lied as much or as openly as our present president. That struck me
Well,
when I read
They
this.
they may have, but not as where's the word I'm
Brazenly?
looking for? Not just brazenly. It's like
Blatantly, right.
I say this in an hour from now I say it's opposite. They've had more consistency in their lives.
So
And this becomes just
was Washington lying to be immediate in the sense of to portray himself or have others portray him as a hero? So Washington, to pull that off,
Once again,
was like,
yeah, I'm going to try to answer your question. I think once again, Washington didn't mind being the first president ultimately, and being important, and being a general, and being victorious. But he did not like the notion that some people really wanted to elevate him too high. Some people wanted to make him king, and he was opposed to that. So he's a complex human being.
mm-hmm.
Well, he also refused to be reelected.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's the one that started the tradition of
Two
you know,
terms.
Two
president-
terms.
No president for life here.
That's right.
So,
It's interesting sonically though that alive and lied are tied together by sound.
yeah, so in other words, to be alive, to be immediate, he was lying. He had to lie.
Isn't that a profound truth about human beings, or not?
It's more or less an image maker.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I would like to look up OED actually on immediate and see what alternative meanings might be hidden inside there.
What do you speculate?
I'm not sure, but I just think that it needs parsing out. What do we mean by immediate? To be now, to be here,
To be present.
or to mediate?
I took it to be contemporary with his time.
Well, I think that's certainly part of it, but what is mediation? You know, to mediate in between you and me, or there's a compromise quality to mediation
I
too.
never thought of the word that way.
You know,
I
to
think
break
that's a
words
brilliant
down.
observation,
Yeah.
and
You know.
and politicians lie or appear to lie in
Or
part
mediate.
because they are mediating difficult. They're occupying a middle space between ideologues on either side who don't want to give in, and that was the nature of the
Certainly was
controversy
history.
between the Jeffersonians and the
Right.
Hamiltonians
Yeah.
Very much so.
in that era. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, and that actually reflects back. I mean, now that I've said that, I see it even more.
Yeah.
Is if you look back at what he's saying about spiritualities, considerations, robots, mediation is the other way of governing and perhaps navigating life. But
Well, the other thing you have to realize if you've been around Washington, D.C. very often, there's a museum that's been organized by the Daughters of the American Revolution, and it's a collection of all the items and the trivia and everything that has George Washington connections. And he was like a real, I will not use the word iconic, but he's beyond iconic. I mean, he became.
he's a graven image.
Yeah, he was, in a way. And if he had been the real greatness of Washington, that he steps away
Yes.
from the people who idolized him and wanted him to be president for life or whatever they wanted him to do. Here was a person that went back to a farmer's life. and
With
a-
slaves, we should add, but yeah,
Add to the
a
absurdity
planter's
of
life.
this.
But yes, he stepped
When
away.
you're little, what's one of the first stories you learn?
Oh, don't tell a lie.
George
Oh, yeah,
Washington
lied.
couldn't take down the cherry tree,
Yeah,
and
thanks
he
for that.
told
That's-
about it.
Of course, he must be lying incessantly.
Oh, he must have lied.
Once again, deconstructing the myths.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, this really is.
It's great, really great. That I
Yeah.
think was cool.
Yeah.
Now I need help.
Okay.
Here are your bones crossed on my breast like a rusty flintlock, a pirate's flag,
that in
gravely
the picture?
specific.
Well, doesn't
I
it
don't
take
think so.
doesn't it take a pirate to break apart
Or I couldn't tell.
a pirate? What does a pirate do? Let's see.
It's outside the rule of law.
Outside the
He's
rule of law,
outside-
technically, although
Yeah,
we
he's
know
on
that
the-
there's more complicated history. But yeah, if you're a pirate, you're sort of like the Wild West guy in a
Yeah.
way too.
Well,
But
I
he
have
uses the pirate image.
The pirate flag is sometimes referred to as the Jolly Roger. It's
Oh,
my
and
name
it's
is.
it's the crossbow. I mean the
Yeah,
bones and the.
right.
So here are your bones.
Well, I
so
have
the pirate's
a
flag.
pirate's flag in my bedroom,
Oh,
and,
great.
which has a reference to the fact that,
It has a giant P on
well,
it for Pittsburgh.
I feel that the whole thing is bound up with the realization that
Not in this house.
you can be outside of history, you can be on your own, you can be you can sail the high seas, and it's a great feeling. And It
Yeah,
gives me
you
a
know,
lot
it's like,
amount of pleasure.
I'm thinking of that Bob Dylan line, to be outside the law, you must be honest. You
Yeah.
know?
That's a great.
But a pirate's flag at sea represented lawlessness
Yeah,
and terror, and you know,
Yeah.
if you were a merchant ship and you were sailing along and then you saw a ship come up to you and they raised the Jolly Roger, you were gone. I mean, they were going to come in and kill you and steal.
Yeah. But then there were those commissioned ones. Right?
Exactly.
Thank you, Queen
That
Elizabeth.
made
You
England
know?
great. Yeah.
Yeah, so, well,
But they didn't raise the Jolly Roger.
but it's also the way of being, I mean, Spain, if you go back to that, Spain is the most powerful nation. How does a smaller nation or a smaller group of people, a la Washington, how do you wage war? Oh shoot, I am so sorry, people.
Kurt and Scott, what do you
Can't
guys
talk.
think?
I should have
Well, what is the question before the House?
Uh-oh, somebody was daydreaming.
No,
We got him,
we've
we got
wandered a
him.
bit.
Daydreaming.
But I think the issue was, what the heck is this pirates
Yeah.
piece doing in here? And you know, so we have a rusty flintlock, like a rusty flintlock, a pirate's flag, bravely specific, and ever so light in the misty glare of a crossing by the water. I think, you know, what is the phrase, the term reliquary? Where the notion,
Reliquary, yeah.
yeah, where you're taking remnants or pieces
Yeah,
of
reliquary.
yeah, reliquary.
Yes.
It's a form of almost worship,
Yes.
and temples in the East
Mm-hmm.
would have, you know, Buddhist relics, you know, a piece of bone. So that came to mind, that this is yet a form of hero worship. Your bones are crossed on my breast, like a rusty flintlock, and you know, pirate's flag, bravely specific. And it just keeps running down, right? Ever so light in the misty glare, like the red glare, I think of the, you know, the Star Spangled Banner, of a crossing by water in winter to a shore. And then,
Other than that, the bridge reaches.
Okay, who's gonna tackle that one?
well, it would be very heroic if you just walked across the bridge, to state the obvious.
Although
Unless it's the Edmund
it's an
Pettus
other
Bridge.
shore, so there's something about other.
No. The shore in this sense isn't a real physical shore, because
That's-
bridges go to a real
Nice.
physical
That's
shore.
exactly it.
But
There
this
you
is
go.
the shore we're going to isn't real.
Yeah.
It's just-
right.
And also, you remember the old phrase, "Don't shoot until you see the white
It's in
of
their
their
eyes."
eyes."
The last two
Don't
sentences.
shoot until
of
the
it.
white of freedom,
Yeah.
glinting on your gun barrel. You see the general fear. That's.
Back to the crumbling nose.
Yeah.
And there is kind of, when you're talking about rivers and crossing to a shore, I mean, for me, there is an undertone that is not specific here, but crossing the river, you know, Charin,
It's mythical,
You know,
the
yeah.
mythical river.
you know.
Mhm.
Styx, maybe.
Yeah, the Styx is what I mean, but
Mhm.
thanks.
Yeah, mythical river.
Yeah.
The white of freedom, you know, first of all, I think white pants, I don't know what that connection might be, but the white of freedom,
And then look how, and then he immediately shifts into a different form of on your gun barrel. So he's kind of like
you see
pulling
the
at the
general
colloquial,
fear.
your gun barrel.
Well, and
So everywhere else the spelling is traditional, accurate, etc., and then your. So I think that's purposeful
Sure it is.
on your gun barrel.
The mythology of heroism in war. War is an
Yeah.
obscenity.
well, if the general has fear, probably because you know, British are attacking,
He's human.
and you shoot them.
Well, general is general. It's not
Or-
capitalized though here. So
Well, no, and it means there's a second meaning, right?
yeah,
Several.
yeah.
And where does Chairman Mao say power comes from?
Barrel of a gun.
Barrel of the gun.
Barrel
There
of
you
a
go.
gun.
Yeah.
But also, can you feel how, for the people that were living during this period, the general fear,
Yes.
it must have been terrifying that this little, not exactly a country yet, has managed to stand up to the power of one of the most powerful European nations. and everybody must have been a little afraid. You know, I
A
would
lot
be
of a lot
damned.
of people
I'd be
fled to
shaking in my
Canada,
boots.
you know, what became Canada.
And you know, the general fear continued after the victory.
Oh, yes.
And it had to do with fear about whether the British or the French are going to invade. And the political parties often divided along that and attacked each other viciously in Trumpian language around those issues.
And let us not forget, what was the war? Shays' Rebellion,
That's
which
right.
actually brought, changed, that fear changed from the Articles of Confederation to the
And this was
Constitution.
before the Declaration of
Because they were
Independence.
afraid of the farmers that they had run into bankruptcy, and Adam
That's right.
benefited.
Yeah.
So,
So, if we had to say what this poem was about, I think we could say something like it's an exploration of hero making, image making around the hero versus a reality of being human. And that's where, you know, the rivers painting was, and that's where this poem, I think, is.
and you could call this like a foundational myth around which we,
Absolutely.
you know, so it's not
Very
just,
well stated.
it's not just any hero.
Our father of our
Yeah.
country.
Right, it's our social myth,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's what we,
our political myth.
Mm-hmm.
and then of course you have to say what happens when all that falls apart. You know, what happens to a
Well,
country.
we're seeing that right now.
Yes,
Yeah.
among other things. So, okay.
All right,
Final words.
Yeah.
final words.
Final words.
Terrific
Anybody?
poem, better poem. You know, feels like a better poem now than it felt when I first read it.
Right. I enjoyed it more now that I've heard all you folks.
So it
I
pays.
appreciate
It pays
that.
to go through poems.
This is
Lovely.
this is what we're doing. Thank you, Al Filreis.
Yes.
All right.